Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. I am Rob, your host, and joining me today is Chris and Daniela. How are you all today?
Great, thank you so much.
Deja vu, just a little bit?
Yeah, can we tell them?
Sure.
Yeah, so we've been recording for a few minutes, and I think it was going very well, so we had to start over. So this is take 2.
Yeah, Chris messed it up.
And it was Chris. Hopefully this is even better this time, I think.
It was a practice run.
Messed it up intentionally.
Yeah. There's this button here that I'm supposed to push. It says rec or something. I'm not sure. But whenever it's red, it works better than when it's green.
You wouldn't think Rob has done this before.
The first time doing a podcast. I forgot to hit record. But here we go again. You can tell by the title, we're talking top 5 wine regions today. And just for some clarification, this is not what kind of, the world as a whole thinks might be the top 5. These are just our subjective or objective reasons for picking these in our top 5. And I also say, it's kind of a moving target for me at least, that, depending on where I'm at, what I'm enjoying, it might kind of move up or down or out of my top 5 or into my top 5 if I find something else. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. Do you all have some criteria that you apply to these regions that you chose for your top 5? I did. I kind of came up with, what qualifies them to get into my top 5 versus.
Yeah. I think, obviously we were just discussing this, but it's definitely the wines come first, which is an obvious answer is, do I want to drink these and how delicious are they to me? And yeah, I think that was definitely the top. But then also, I factored in a few things that might be a little bit controversial.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I factored in beauty of the region. Do I want to be there, actually? And most of them I have traveled to, so maybe it's more biased. I also factored in, like you did, Chris, a number of different styles. Are they making not just one wine very well, but all wines very well if they produce more than one style? And also, sometimes there's a process-driven nature behind some wines. Do they have to struggle more than other regions to make these particular styles? Maybe this is a sadistic way of looking at it, but some of these regions I put hard work above maybe just letting the grapes ferment naturally. So there was that in my criteria and analysis. I think I rewarded difficulty of creating these styles maybe more than traditional fermentation.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think
that's deep.
Those are all
I'm
really
kind
good
of feeling like an idiot.
Yeah.
It's very philosophical.
No, that's great. I think I would add to that. I think I used all the criteria you did too in some way or another, and maybe I weighted it differently. And I didn't do this mathematically, of course. This is just
you didn't.
I wrote
you
down
didn't create
some
spreadsheets.
Things, and I did
That's
not
very
create
shocking for you.
No. But I did also consider to some extent what I thought in general of the people who made the wines. And it's obviously a gross generalization in some way, but I think you can, to some extent, generalize about who is making these wines, and I think that does affect the wine drinking experience.
What do you mean by that? Do you if you like the French or not? How is that? What do you mean?
Well, it's not whether I like the French or not. It's
do you like the French or not?
I do actually. I do like the French, and so. But I guess what I mean by that is, who are the types of people who are making the wines? And
are we talking like farmers?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
hands in the dirt, wine people versus
that's
a
part
big.
Of it.
Okay,
that's part of it. Corporations, and of course, that's not an overriding consideration, but it was one consideration that I had, specifically as to a couple of wine regions I can think of that went into it. So none of these things predominated. It was just that there are a lot of factors that go into your feeling about what are the best wine regions, and I think objectively there are some objective measures of quality that we can apply, and I think I've tried to apply those too.
Now, I do want to go back and say that you two are kind enough to come on this episode, and I wanted two what I call experts in wine, knowledgeable in wine, to come on and do this episode with me, because I think not only you two, but the audience might get some giggles out of what you all choose, and this very, deep, educated, putting, all kinds of thought into how you guys pick your regions for this top 5. And then I'm kind of embarrassed to even give what my criteria was for picking these. I'm an average wine drinker. I'm just a guy who loves wine. So I think it'll be funny, the contrast of how you guys think when you look at a wine region and the wine, what's in the bottle, versus somebody like me, who I think most of our listeners are more like me. But I think hearing how you guys look at wine is going to be helpful for them going forward and starting to explore wine a little bit more.
And the funny part is, it doesn't matter what we think. Like, we're a very small percentage of who's actually purchasing and consuming wine. Yeah. So I actually prefer to hear from consumers like
really?
you. Yeah, because that's who I'm selling to. I sell wine. And so I am more interested in what's happening in your thought process versus mine, because mine's such an esoteric, like very small, kind of negligible part of overall consumption, I think.
Yeah, and what I would say about that, Rob, is that I identify with you a lot when you talk about just being a wine drinker. At heart, I'm a wine drinker.
Yeah.
None of this other stuff matters if it weren't for the fact that I'm a wine drinker. So if I didn't love wine, if I didn't love drinking wine, I wouldn't care about any of this. I wouldn't care about wine regions. I wouldn't care about producers. I wouldn't care about how grapes are grown. That stuff is all, to me, subordinate to the most important thing, which is sitting down with my wife or with friends and drinking wine and enjoying wine.
Sharing wine.
Yeah, and drinking it and enjoying it. And that's the thing. I love the product. I love consuming it.
Yeah,
so ultimately, I'm a consumer of wine.
Absolutely. And that's kind of, I always say for me, you drink something, and it might be something new that you don't know anything about, but that's what drives you to go, okay, this is really good. Where does it come from? Who made it? What's the process? And that, to me, is what kind of gets you to dive a little deeper into wine, which is ultimately what I love, learning all those things. I do want to ask, well, let's start here. We're mentioning both of you and wine, and you guys have some knowledge. People are going, who are they? What do they know?
Yeah.
What are their credentials? Tell everybody. Daniela, you go first. Just a little bit
Sure.
about where you are in wine, what's your background, your education, things like that.
Sure. So I've been in the wine industry for 15 years. Actually, my parents started a vineyard in Texas. All right. So I was raised on a Texas vineyard, and I planted grapes as a kid and never wanted to be in the industry ever up until I graduated college, and I needed a sense of direction. And I started getting certified in wine. I'd always worked in restaurants, and they're like, well, you're the wine girl. You need to know about wine. So I figured I'd go through, and like Chris, I have a WSET, Wine and Spirit Education Trust Diploma in wines, and I have worked in almost every facet of the wine industry, from marketing to sales to education, and distribution, and currently I have 2 jobs. I sell Burgundy wines direct to consumer, so I'm in luxury private sales, and I go around the country and I put on, tastings and multi-course wine dinners and try to sell Burgundy. Nice. And I also run a wine school, and that's how I met Chris. He is one of the instructors. He's the only other instructor at the moment, and we teach certification courses, so those same WSET classes.
And that's just not a wine school, that's the Texas wine.
Yeah, it's for the Texas Wine School, and we're the only major wine school in Texas, and we teach those levels 1 through 4, and it's awesome. I've been doing that for 7 years, and that's my pet project. I love it.
Awesome. Chris, you've been on the show, but
I have been on the show, but I came at this differently because I practiced law for almost 30 years. But while that was all going on, I was reading wine books and drinking wine and tasting wine, and I'm just very curious. And I became extremely interested in wine, so I started reading a lot about wine. I started taking courses. I did the French Wine Scholar and other things, and then ultimately took the WSET courses through getting the diploma. I decided to write a wine book, so I wrote a book that we've talked about before called Press for Champagne. We're drinking champagne right now. We're drinking actually Louis Roederer Blanc de Blanc 2013, which is a champagne I mentioned in my book. And then recently I've just started to get more into wine writing and teaching about wine. And that's how I met Daniela. And so that's where I am. And it's been more of a personal journey into wine, but one that has hooked me for a while.
Absolutely. Can one of you tell me, a lot of people are hearing the what's the right way to say it? The WSET, the WSET? I mean, how do you...
I think the only thing is don't say we set. I'm so tired of people saying we set, and it's mainly like, I don't know, people in the Court of Masters that say that. I don't know what it is. So
in the wine world today, with shows and wine, I think maybe it's just me is become very, very popular. Everybody knows the sommelier. What is the difference between becoming a sommelier versus the training and education you get through the WSET?
So, Daniela certainly can answer this, but I mean, it's the one major difference is that the WSET, so the Wine and Spirit Education Trust in London, is, I think, the premier wine education organization in the world. And what it doesn't focus on is service of wine in restaurants. So the Court of Master Sommeliers definitely does, because they're trying to train people who can do wine service. So it's an educational organization that was meant for the wine trade, the WSET is. And now it's opened up all over the world where people who aren't in the wine trade but want to learn about wine take the WSET courses. And there are 4 different levels to it, and the top level is the diploma course, which can take 2 to 3 years or more potentially, but the initial courses, level 1 and 2, can be done in a few days. And so that's what the organization is. I think those are the main differences.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, that's totally right, but I would say one of the things that really attracted me to, especially diploma level, is that you're focusing more on the buying habits, trends, and trade in the wine world. So it's not just enough to know everything there is to know about every major wine and region. It's also who's buying these. What are the advantages and disadvantages of marketing these wines? Because you could have the best wine in the world, and it would be unmarketable if people didn't know what it was, like weren't familiar with the grape or the region, or didn't like the price. Like there's so many different factors, and that to me is so interesting because I'm a salesperson. Yeah. I need to make sure that there are no hindrances to getting these wines on the market. You know?
That's a great point. Just to add something real quickly about that, the 3 things you hear from the WSET are style, quality, and price. And just to focus on quality, a big emphasis in the WSET is being able to distinguish between 2 different wines based on their level of quality. You cannot get past the diploma courses unless you're able to write about 2 wines blind and whether one is a higher level of quality than the other and why specifically. And you can't just BS your way through it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of emphasis on that. And that's what I think is really great about the WSET is you get trained in objective markers of differences in wine quality.
So top 5 wine regions for me and you, Daniela. Top 4 for Chris. And we know you're number 1. Everybody who knows you knows. I thought we would do this kind of going in like fantasy football. We'll start 1, 2, 3, and then we'll go back in reverse order. And then we'll name our 5, 4, and get down. And I wanted to do it 5 to 1, where, obviously top 5, it's kind of, I don't know how tough this was for you all. I mean, was top 5 wine regions fairly easy? For me, I probably listed 20 regions that I enjoy, and picking the top 5, there were a couple that were like, you're in there. But then filling in maybe 4 and 5 might have been a little bit more difficult for me. Was this a plug them and go, or was this kind of, you really had to see which was going to crack the top 5?
Well, I found this really easy, actually,
Really?
because I had to be really fair, and that was the hard part, actually, was staying out of France for a while. Like, I was like, okay, France, love French wines, and I'm like, I can't pick all French regions, and I also have to be very fair to other wine regions that I like. So I picked them rather quickly, and it was all gut feeling. And then I went over them this morning with my husband to make sure I didn't miss one. So that was helpful.
I like
But
that.
what did you think, Chris?
I had a similar process in a way. It's funny, I didn't worry about fairness as much because I don't think fairness really plays into.
Does that mean you have 5 French regions?
Well, we'll see. But I just don't think when you're talking about a subjective inquiry, which is what you asked us about, that fairness really plays a part in that. But what I did do is, like you, Daniela, it didn't take me a lot of time. I basically knew what they were. What was hard for me was when we get to honorable mentions, I'll talk about some that frankly could easily be in my top 5, but just didn't make it because it didn't seem to make sense as part of the exercise, if that makes sense at all. I can explain, but there are some quirky ones, let's put it that way, that didn't make my top 5 that probably would in some other version of this.
Okay.
And then it's funny you mentioned your husband, because when I put mine together, I just asked my wife, okay, what are your top 5? And she wrote hers down, and they were very close to mine,
Same.
which was interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
So for me, kind of trying to decide what was some criteria to get my list put together, a couple of things where one was, value in that region. Do you get good value for what you're buying?
That's a good
Because,
point.
a lot of people ask, does good wine have to be expensive? And to me, the answer is obviously no. It doesn't have to be. I think there's a line of, diminishing returns when you get to a certain value. Man, there you go.
We're pouring things up.
A $300 wine way better than some $80 wines. Maybe, but maybe not. Not always the case. So value was something I looked for. In the region, I think, Chris, you mentioned it earlier, what's the volume of different wines and styles that you can get within that region that I think makes it fun to kind of go through that area and explore a little bit. And then wines that punch up, things that I drank and go, I paid $30 for this. I mean, I'm glad I only paid $30, but I would have paid $60.
Yeah.
I'd been happy if I got this for $60, I'd have been very happy.
Yeah.
Wines like that. And then, obviously it has to be something that I've been drinking and have tried and just really enjoyed either that particular varietal or that style or something that just kind of intrigued me and said, I want to go into this region a little bit more. And that's one that's on my list for that reason.
Yeah.
But
That makes sense.
you guys ready to start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do
Top
it.
5. Who wants to lead the way? Lead off hitter.
Chris.
Okay.
Daniela.
No, I know. I really am curious because
Okay.
I actually really wanted to know yours.
Okay, fine. So I will start if you'd like me to. So my number 5 is interesting in that I think most people would expect it to be higher than 5. That's the story, I think, of my number 5. So my number 5 wine region is Bordeaux.
Okay.
And I think, again, most people would think that that's somewhat of a put down to Bordeaux. I don't think it is. I love Bordeaux. I mean, when you talk about some of the world's great red wines, you look to Bordeaux. Not only that, you have, I think, beautiful white wines. I personally love Bordeaux Blanc. And one of my favorites, I don't know if we've talked about this, but Smith-Haut Lafite Blanc, is just an absolutely amazing, because people talk about Sauvignon Blanc, and a lot of times they skip over Bordeaux when they talk about it, but Bordeaux is some of the world's greatest Sauvignon Blanc. And then, of course, you get the sweet wines, and I love sweet wines. I love Sauternes, Barsac. I opened an 89 Chateau d'Yquem not long ago for some people who had never had aged Sauternes before, and it blew their minds. So to me, I love Bordeaux. It's just that it only made it to 5, so there'll be others, but that was my number 5.
I think you bring up a good point, though, about white wines. I think that's a region where if you asked 100 people that are, just the casual wine drinkers, white would not, if you said name, wines in Bordeaux, white wouldn't probably come up in, if you said name your top 3.
Yeah. So Daniela, so now you've heard 5. Are you ready to criticize number 5?
I actually am not because
Okay.
I'm really happy that Bordeaux made your list. Bordeaux didn't even make my top 5,
Wow.
which is very, very controversial, which Bordeaux should have. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I don't get that thing from Bordeaux. I get it from the Sauternes. I love sweet wines
Yeah.
as well. but I think I just don't get it from the whites or the reds. I don't get that joy and that effervescence. Like, it doesn't light up my soul and make me dance around. Like, I won't do bad things for Bordeaux.
No, this is exactly right. This is, that is, and I would express it slightly differently, but you're on the same point that I am about Bordeaux. I love Bordeaux. Again, the wines are beautiful, but what they're not, in my view, is they're not moving. That they're not. I don't get strong emotional reactions to Bordeaux. To me, an emotional reaction to wine is very important. And now, there are some, again, the sweet wines, some of the older Bordeaux that I've had that are amazing. But when we start moving up the list, it's because, to me, having a strong emotional reaction to a wine, having it draw out emotions in me, make me want to cry, make me want to laugh, make me just be happy to be alive. That is where you start getting into the higher levels for me, and that's why Bordeaux, as great as it is 5.
Okay.
100%. Yep, I love that. I love the emotional, because my list is purely emotional. It's probably too emotional.
Okay, well, let's hear number 5 on your list.
Okay. So this is probably not something that would make many people's lists, but it might. My number 5 is the Douro region of Portugal, for a number of factors that Chris probably knows, but to clue everyone else in. I know one factor. Yeah. I just got married there in June, so a few months ago. And I'd never been to Portugal before, ever. And I have to say, this is probably going to sound like a tourism ad at this point, but I have never been welcomed with more hospitality and selflessness than I was in the Douro. Like, you go and people are just like, what do you want? Everything is yours. How can we help you? How can we make your experience so amazing? And it wasn't just because I was getting married there, but it was everywhere I went. People were so amazing. Also, it's the most beautiful place, one of the most beautiful places on this planet. You go and there's steep slopes, the terraces, like you walk out and your breath catches every single time. Now, am I the biggest fan of port?
I was going to ask you about the wines.
Yeah. So the wines, I know.
I don't know that region at all.
So the wines, I think there's something to be said about port in general, which is it's the longest lived wine ever, or one of them. You got high alcohol, high tannins. Yes, I think aged port is contemplative. You sit and you think about it forever, especially if it's high quality and it's over 50 years old. You're forced to be present with that wine. And I think that after 15 years, I don't want to just chug wine anymore. I want to think about it. And I think there's something to be said about very, very old, ancient port.
Is that region just port?
No, so they do make, whites and reds that are great. I mean, they're good. I think that they're not the best, to be honest.
Are there reds, are they varietals that are indigenous to that area?
Yes. Okay. They're all indigenous, or they're mostly blends. Okay. So it's things that you've never heard of. But I think for value, I think you can get some amazing examples of something so terrific that, I don't know, I don't think you can find those prices anywhere else too. Or I think you can, but I think it's difficult to find something so high quality and so inexpensive.
That's one you surprised me with. Coming into this, I did not think Portugal or a region in Portugal would be on anybody's list. Never even entered my mind.
Yeah, so I will say that, I love port, and I love tawny port, I love ruby port, I like aged tawny, tawny port and ruby port are very different, but vintage port, I love old vintage port, and I love older tawny port as well. So I'm definitely with you on the wines, and it's a region that has a lot of history to it. So I think it's a great choice.
Yeah, and also I put in extra things other than the wine.
Right.
I think I put in a
Yeah.
very emotional element, and I urge people to go there because I think you'll have this emotional experience. And what you were talking about, I resonate with 100% because you need the emotion behind it. And now I have that, and it probably wouldn't have made my list. It definitely would not have made my list before June.
Yeah.
So now, no matter what event or dinner you're at, after dinner you have a glass of port, your mind's automatically
Yes.
going to go back to
Yes, and I'm going to support the Douro more than ever before
Yeah.
because I was welcomed with, such open
that's
arms.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
that's the purely emotional, and then everything else is going to be pretty emotional, but with maybe more
I
wine.
know a lot of
awesome.
times we talk to friends and people and we go, what's your best pour of whiskey or your that you've ever had, or your best bottle of wine you ever had? And it might not be the bottle or the whiskey that you would go, that's it, but it's because of the experience to what you're getting at,
Yeah.
or who you were drinking it with that night and what those memories mean that
Yep.
made that particular pour so great. And I think that's a
Yeah.
great way to look at it.
Yeah, I do too. Wine travel definitely affects how you feel about wines.
Yes.
It has to, and so that makes sense to me. I've never been to the Douro. I've been to Portugal, but now I want to go.
Yeah,
See,
absolutely.
it worked.
My number 5 is a region that I've not been into for a very long time, but I got educated on the region where I understand it a little bit more. I read a book on the region, which helped me quite a bit. And, when you talk about regions and understanding the process of making wine in that region and kind of the rules, if you will, it really allows you to explore a little bit better, in my opinion, so that you understand what you're looking for, what you're buying, what you should open, what you shouldn't open, things like that. So what cracked the top 5 for me? And again, I'm still kind of early in the journey, but I love this region so much so quickly, it cracked the top 5. And Chris, you can't say much, but it's Champagne.
Okay. All right.
And that
yeah.
might be an obvious one for a lot of people, but it was a region that I had never really explored because to me it was a little bit intimidating.
Yeah.
Champagne, and how do you buy a champagne? What's a good champagne versus a bad champagne? I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
But once gaining a little bit of information and knowledge on it and understanding, now when I go to the store and I want to buy champagne, I know what I'm looking for and how to buy, and when I drink it, I'm happy with what's in the glass most of the time. And I know kind of what that process was and how it was made and enjoying it. So it's probably an obvious one, but if you're not into champagne, you haven't drank champagne, you should, because it's absolutely a beautiful pour in the glass, and I'm absolutely enjoying going through that region.
I have a feeling this will come up later. So maybe we
Well,
can spread out these
That's what I was
comments.
going to say. Chris
but-
can't say anything.
No, the other thing I would say I was just going to say that, honestly, Rob, when you're saying that it's intimidating, and I think it is intimidating to a lot of people. I think for a lot of people, it might not make their top 5 because they just wouldn't think about it because it's not something that they consider really to be in
They
some
don't know
sense
enough
a
about
wine.
it.
And
Yeah, they don't
So-
treat it like wine.
Yeah, exactly. So the fact
Yeah.
that it's in your top 5, I think, is a very good thing.
Yeah.
It being 5 is totally fine. It's that you started to explore it and you see the beauty in it, and you've been able to understand enough to buy it and enjoy it. I think that's great.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess we're doing the snake, so I come back with number 2.
4.
Or excuse me, thank you, Chris. Number 4 on my list. And this is a region also that I'm fairly new into, but I absolutely think they make some beautiful wines. I think some people might think of this region as a little bit maybe overplayed. I think it, maybe just for me, it's still kind of under the radar. I love the grape. I would love to go to this country and see the region, to your point, Daniela. I think I've heard people go, and it's just beautiful, this whole country, not specifically the region, but the whole country. And that's Rioja. I love Tempranillo. I think when you talk about just a beautiful wine, and then you kind of combine that with value, when you're starting to look at a region that you can get quality wines at a good cost, and add to that with usually some good age on those wines, because a lot of people look for wine today and they go, it's hard to find a wine with age on it. And if you want age, you got to pay, more than whatever. I have found in exploring this region that I can get some, for example, I bought some 2008s not too long ago for about $40, $45 a bottle.
Yeah.
And that's good age on that wine. It's going to be a beautiful wine for what I think is a reasonable price.
I love that you put that. I love Rioja. That made my husband's list. He loves
nice.
Tempranillo. But Rioja value, come on.
Yeah.
Like to find, and the wines are stunning. Some of them are bad for the sake of being bad, but a lot of them are incredible, and you're not busting your wallet, to your point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also say that I really enjoy white Rioja as well.
Okay.
So the whites and the reds, but I completely agree with you in terms of the value, what you're getting for your money in terms of the age, because I like older wines and I like age on wines, and so I naturally go to Rioja a lot of times because I can get older wines that don't break the bank and have these tertiary characteristics in the wine, and I'm a big fan, so I think that's a great choice.
Good. Okay, I'm glad because I thought
Huge fan.
I thought I might have got a little like,
No.
what are you doing here? Okay, good.
Spot on. Please, I preach the gospel of Spanish wine because it has to be done. People need to know. They need to know, Chris.
And, I think people when they think wine, they think you got to go to France or Italy. And
Yeah.
I've told a lot of people don't knock going to Spain. I think having a wine experience there, and arguably for me, the food is pretty competitive. When you talk about eating food in a region, Spain is very competitive with French or the Italians.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
So.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Thank you for saying that, Rob.
So number 2 for you. Number 4 for you. Thank you, Chris.
4 for me is we're hammered guys. 4 for me. Ooh, okay. 4 for me is a good one. I love this wine. I constantly gravitate towards it. It is a true love, and it's a beautiful region on top of that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is 100% Nebbiolo from Barolo. Love Barolo.
Awesome. Yeah.
Love it. And you talk about value, talk about aged wines and ageability. You can still, I would argue, find value in Barolo. And it's gotten pricier, definitely, in the past 20 years.
Now, would we throw in, would the region be Piemonte?
Yeah, so
you could have Barbaresco in there too, couldn't you? Or would it just be Barolo?
I'm going
You're going
Barolo.
specific.
I'm going
specific.
super
Okay.
specific because I love Barbaresco. I would actually, wonderful wines. And, but I just find that in terms of sheer pleasure, I often find like Barolo is it for me. And the interesting part about that is you're dealing with one singular grape variety. And you're just doing it so well. So there's really not a whole lot of variety here. There are in terms of maybe winemaking styles and producers, but it's one single varietal that is killing it.
But that's, to your point, that should speak to the quality of that grape.
Yeah.
Because most grapes, there's a little blending to balance it out, to do something to that wine.
Sure, and it's the quality of the soils and the climate. Like it's the terroir, it's the overarching, I don't know, I guess, climate and terroir, for lack of a better term, of Barolo. And that yields these amazing wines. Have you ever been to Barolo, by the way?
I have not. No, it's on my list,
So
but
cool.
I keep telling my wife that every year I think I want to go to Piedmont, and
Yeah, you have to go.
we really want to go. But I think that's a great choice. I put Piedmont, well, not Barolo specifically, but Piedmont, the region in general, on my honorable mention
It's on
list
mine
because
too.
it was definitely close, and
Yeah.
it's hard to argue with that.
So here's a question for you on Barolo with people listening. I think a lot
Yeah.
of people who have heard of that region might think, yeah, but, again, getting back to the age thing we were talking about with Rioja, you have to let Barolos age, 15, 20, 25 years. But I've heard a lot of people say that's changed in recent years. You don't have to wait 15, 20 years to drink it.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of like new age style, newer, new school process of thinking, which is you don't need to let the grapes ferment on the skins for as long. It's called the maceration process, a little bit shorter. You need, it's more new oak or more oxidative processes to soften that tannin. So yes, you need a little bit less time. However, I think we have a problem in this country, which is we're Americans. We want it now. We want everything now. And I think that that's fine. We're just all about instant gratification. But just wait on these wines, please, or buy some at auction that are a little bit older, because it's really it's an experience that you'll never forget, I think.
Yeah, and in a way, by the way, there's a great movie, I think, called The Barolo Boys, about this this stylistic schism that happened in Barolo, where you had the traditionalists versus the modernists. It's a very funny movie and very interesting, but the idea was to make Barolo that was more, in quotes, international in style, or could be drunk earlier. To me, one problem I have in a way with Barolo is that I don't really like it until it's old. And so you go to, especially in Texas, where the wine lists so often are just completely skewed to younger wines. You go to a steakhouse and they'll have this really young Barolo, and I don't want it. I mean, I don't. You can give it to me, honestly. And so I just feel like that's the issue that I have. I own some Barolo that I'm waiting on. Hopefully, I'll live long enough to get to the point where I want to drink it. But that's potentially problematic. I
was going to make that comment that the young person here says, "Just wait."
Right.
Some of us are at an age
Daniela's got.
I don't have a lot of time to wait.
Daniela can buy Barolo futures right now or whatever, and
I just hang out with a lot of people with old Barolo. I think that's what I do,
and
so that helps.
Yeah,
that helps.
Smart.
So is there with the new the Barolos that are being released today? Is there kind of you have a general rule? Is it still 10 years? You want to wait at least 10 years, or can you drink them in 5 or 6? Or
no, I mean they're released after 4, so I would wait 10. It depends on the producer too, because some of them are really lovely. But I'd wait 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chris?
So it's number 4 for me. It's interesting that you just went to Italy. Number 4 for me is Tuscany. I got into wine in a serious way. When I say serious, I mean where I thought intellectually and emotionally I want to dive into this. I got into it with Brunello. And we were just talking about waiting on wines. You've got to wait on Brunello, in my opinion. Anyway, I'm drinking 2004s and 2006s.
Humble brag.
But
yeah.
But I just think that, so when you talk about Tuscany, you're talking about a lot of Sangiovese and obviously Montalcino, and you're talking about Brunello. Also, you've got Chianti. But to me, Brunello, and I was just talking about this the other day with someone. I had opened a Brunello that's on the darker, richer side, which I don't really prefer. But Sangiovese can just be this gorgeous grape and make this wine that is really lighter in color, and can be herbal and soft. And I just think that it's one of the world's most beautiful wines is great Brunello. But then you've got, in Tuscany, you've got Chianti, you've got the Super Tuscans, and what I love about Super Tuscans is the variety, because I love seeing these amazing blends of Cabernet Sauvignon and Sangiovese or Merlot and Sangiovese or Cabernet Franc.
Some Syrah.
And all this stuff thrown in there, and they're making great wines. And you asked me, do I like the French? I do like the French, but the Italians, come on. I mean, go to Italy, visit Italy, walk into any cafe or bookstore or restaurant, and try to have a bad experience.
Yeah.
Try to have somebody who isn't nice to you. I mean, so, and I feel like it does come through in Italian wines. And So also, and just to finish this off, I guess, is with Tuscany, Brunello can be expensive, but Rosso di Montalcino, which is like, in a way, the second wine or wines that are made to be consumed earlier.
Yeah, I'm going to have a question for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, are very affordable and absolutely delicious in many cases.
So do you buy that wine, or do you go back to a Chianti Classico or a Chianti Classico Reserva?
So it depends. I mean, Chianti Classico, there are great Chianti Classicos. I am just, again, you said this is subjective, right?
Sure.
So I'm so in love with Montalcino.
Oh, okay.
And I've been there, again, I've been to all the regions that I'm talking about, but I love Brunello so much that what I do is, I buy Brunello, it waits, it sits, and I drink Rosso di Montalcino. Yeah,
that's a good strategy.
Waiting. Yeah.
Okay, I like that. You get to come back with number 3.
Oh, okay, number 3. Oh, number 3. Okay.
I think I know it.
You do?
I think I might know it.
Okay.
Can I guess?
Go ahead, guess.
Burgundy?
No.
Oh, wow, okay.
Number 3 is the Rhone Valley. Oh. I am absolutely in love with the Rhone Valley. And in a way, it's unfair to say the Rhone Valley because you really got north and south, and they are quite distinct. But we'll call it the Rhone Valley.
Unlike Daniela, we're taking advantage of
the wine region.
Okay, so first of all, I need a comment here. I didn't know we could pick an entire
region.
I thought we could pick. I thought it was like really specific.
No sub.
Well,
so
we
I would have
wine regions. So.
Yeah, but like a wine region could be something as broad as that, but something as minuscule. So I went really minuscule.
That's
See, and we should have talked to her because we talked about that and we went,
okay,
that's an appellation, or we thought of it like an...
I'm standing by because mine are very, very specific.
Do you know what?
I like yours.
Yeah, it's okay. Process. It really doesn't, it doesn't matter. But I think, to me, when you talk about the Rhone Valley, this is where you get into a multiplicity of great different types of wines, right? So in the north, all the Syrah, and I love Syrah, and even different expressions of Syrah. When you talk about the Côte Rôtie, and you talk about Cornas and Hermitage, I love the whites of the Northern Rhone, especially the Marsanne-Roussanne blends. When you get to the Southern Rhone, you've got Châteauneuf-du-Pape, you've got the rosés of Tavel. I mean, there is something for everybody in the Rhone Valley, and the wines are absolutely delicious. So,
and me, from the value scale.
Well, value scale too. Now, there isn't value at the high end. So if you're talking about like Chave Hermitage, you're going to pay a lot of money for that, or the Lalas, the Guigal Lalas in the Côte Rôtie. But yes, you can absolutely, you can buy. So Guigal, for example, is a famous producer, right? Yeah. In the Northern Rhone, and specifically the Côte Rôtie. Guigal has these very expensive wines. But their least expensive wines are like $20, are absolutely great. And it's funny because I see people criticizing the lower wines or the lesser ones in favor of the higher ones. There's no reason to. They're really good. And so when I say there's something for everyone, I think there's something at almost every price point in the Rhone Valley too.
Chris, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have to, you have to pick one. The north and the south, the northern and southern Rhone, first of all, they're only linked by a river, as you know. They're so different. Well, you have to pick one.
Well, first of all,
I don't want him to have to pick one. I don't want him to have to pick one.
First of all, okay, he doesn't want me to. First of all.
You know why?
No.
I will get to later.
Okay, but I'll just say that obviously, I think it's fairly obvious. If you had to pick one, you would pick the northern Rhone Valley. Okay, so, but he said wine regions. This is taught. It is the Rhone Valley is taught as a wine region.
Okay.
But when you teach in the WSET, it teaches the Rhone Valley is a wine region. But if I had to pick, yes, of course I would pick the Northern Rhone. I mean, that's a no-brainer, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, I just wanted that settled because I feel like,
But again, so just to take rosé, right? There are a lot of rosés I really don't enjoy. But Tavel in the Southern Rhone makes these more structured rosés, more color, more concentration. They're amazing. And again, they're like $20 $20, $25.
Are they using like a Grenache or a Syrah?
Yes, well, they're blends of a lot of grape varieties, reds and even some whites.
Okay.
But they're macerated on the skins longer, so there's more color, more extraction
I've not
in
had
these
that.
rosés. Yeah. Anyway, but yes, if I'm being forced to take one north or south, I'll take the north. But the Rhone Valley is number 3.
Okay. Love
So
it.
we're back to you, Daniela, and number 3.
Yeah. My number 3 is also extremely unpopular. Guaranteed.
Okay, unpopular.
Yeah, no, like not
that
just to you or to you, really to everybody.
But that makes me ask the question. You're telling me
Yeah.
people, you're going to say the region, and people are going to go, I don't like wines from there?
Yeah.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah. My number 3 is Jerez, which is for sherry.
Oh my gosh.
Love sherry.
I love sherry.
Yeah, but you like sherry. Nobody
you just
else
said it's
likes sherry.
unpopular.
Okay. Yeah, to 99.99% of the world.
Right.
I
You don't
put it in a
count.
lot of the dishes I make.
Yeah,
Oh my
exactly. Exactly. See, that's my point.
I don't know anything about it.
Exactly.
I think
Okay, tell us.
that's what
Exactly.
it more is.
Bring it.
I've never been, actually, this is the only winery, I've never been there. But I love sherry so much, and nobody's drinking it because nobody likes it.
I love that you're talking about these because it's not
Yeah,
something it
that's the
wouldn't have
point.
even been on my radar. So I appreciate this.
I'm a sherry freak.
Okay.
It's a sickness, really, because I'm okay. There are so many misconceptions about sherry, and the stigma about sherry is that it's a cooking wine, or that it's sweet, and there's cream sherry, and that's what my great grandmother used to drink, or whatever. That is wrong in terms of, there's a lot of bulk wine coming out of Jerez, which is fine, and they kind of shot themselves in the foot because of it. But I think that the dry styles that are made in a more thoughtful manner, there's a very specific way of making sherry that's incredibly impressive and is replicated in very few areas of the world, but it originated there. It's called the Solera system, and it's a system of fractional blending, and you get the most incredible style out of it. Like the complexity of these wines is unmatched. I think it's so cool, and I think it's so misunderstood, and I like those weird wines that nobody's paying attention to because there's value there.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything you just said. I've been to Jerez as well. It's a beautiful, the people, you talk about the people and the friendliness and the food.
I really want to go.
But the wines, so it's funny. It does require somebody taking a leap a little bit to get into them. But once you get into them, the other thing about sherry, and when she talked about the dry styles, we're talking about Oloroso or Amontillado, Palo Cortado. These are great food wines that people don't understand. Like you can have this chicken dish with Oloroso sherry. It's a dry style of sherry. It is absolutely amazing. But people are like, no, I want a Chardonnay. It's like, but if you had this wine, you would see how amazing it is. But what it does suffer from, and Daniela pointed out, is really a PR problem. Mm-hmm. With these bogus styles of sherry that really the English are responsible for, cream sherry and all that, that are garbage. If you just can forget about that and focus on the dry styles.
Let me ask you this question, because I would say in the States, it's thought of and I think promoted as a cooking wine.
Yeah.
Is it that way around the globe, do you see, as people in wine? Or is there other, when you get outside that area, do people in Europe drink sherry? And my second question would be, how do you drink sherry? You mentioned it with a meal. I was going into an after dinner kind of pour, but I didn't know.
It depends. Exactly. Again, the dry styles you would drink with food. PX sherry is a very sweet wine, which you would drink later, which I think is, again, amazing. It's a sweet wine. But the dry styles, I would have them with food.
But this is the problem with sherry. This is why they're suffering. It's because there's the bulk dry sherries that are for cooking. There's the bulk sweet sherries that are for drinking and, getting drunk.
Are they quality?
No.
Okay.
There's the dry styles that are good, that are meant for sipping and pairing, and then there's that PX sherry that's a sweet style that's meant for contemplative sipping as well. So this is what I'm saying, is it takes an expert hand in order to understand this. This is coming from a wine expert's point of view, somebody that has been there, and also somebody that did not like sherry when I first tried it. It's very abrasive, it's very nutty, you're expecting a sweet product, and you're not getting any sweetness to balance out the saltiness, and to be frank, a slight bitterness that most people would find not pleasant.
Is there a beverage that is drink a lot in the States that you might go, if you like, that's comparable, or is it unique in its own way?
No, to me, there's not a single thing like it. And that's the problem, is that it's drunk locally. And to me, and sherry, Jerez, they tried to do a sherry cocktail program. Yeah. You see a lot of sherry in cocktails because they're trying to add the nuttiness with sweetness. Like, they're trying everything.
So here's my question. Is it a kind of egg and chicken? Meaning, we don't have quality sherries in the States because nobody's demanding it, but they're not going to bring it over until somebody starts asking for it?
We have them. It's just that only certain people buy them, and you don't see them a lot on the shelves.
They're in New York.
Yeah, you got to go to New York and L.A. And
But like in Houston, where I live,
no,
it's hard to find. And I think Houston as a city has great wine selection. When you get, there's a lot of wine shops where you can get some good stuff.
And I'm sure there are bars with great sherry programs everywhere. And in major cities, I would say. Like in Austin, we have one, Small Victory. They have decent sherries by the glass, and maybe a few others. But yeah, it's not something, if people aren't asking for it.
Well, now you want an unpopular opinion. This will be unpopular, I'm guessing, with Daniela, what I'm about to say. But so for me, buying wine, if I want to buy sherries that I want to buy, and I live in Austin, and if they aren't, I don't care where I live. I buy stuff on the internet all the time and have it delivered, and I use winesearcher.com. A lot of people in the trade don't like winesearcher.com, or they think there's something wrong with it, or I love it. I don't have a piece of it. I pay. Yeah. I'm a paid subscriber. But this is where you will find wine stores in some other part of the country who are very willing to ship wines that you want to your door, and I don't have to worry about what the local stores are carrying.
I agree with you. I don't find that, and that's not unpopular at all. I find Vivino that's the one that I don't like.
Okay, so people have strong reactions to some of these.
I think you're fine.
Okay.
I approve of this
feel better?
message.
Okay. You feel a little low.
He's wiping a bead of sweat away.
Okay.
But that's a great choice.
Thank you.
I'm intrigued by the rest of her list now, because we're really in, these parts
I'm
of the
all
world.
over the place,
I
y'all.
love it. I think the listeners are going to get a kick out of that, because I was worried we were going to have, for the most part, our list would match up. Yeah, and
mine are boring from here on out. So.
My number 3 is Chris's number 5, Bordeaux.
Okay.
I love Bordeaux because I think you can get value there. And I think that quality and quantity, there's just so much to pick from. It's almost a little bit intimidating as well, learning who's a quality producer, who's not, what you're buying, all this kind of. But overall, I think exploring that region, it's one that it's hard to get out of once you get in, because it's just so much that you can go through. And then as you kind of like the old video game, you want to level up a little bit, and you find a producer that you like, and you're buying and I've always been told, if a producer can make a great $20 wine, then go ahead and start, going through their portfolio a little bit. If they can't make a good $20, $25 wine, why would you buy their $100 wine? I don't know how you guys feel about that as wine experts, but
I had a knee-jerk reaction when you said you can find value in Bordeaux. But then I realized you're totally right. I think the $20 wines, like even the regional Bordeauxs or the rosés or the white Bordeaux, they're lovely, and I'd rather drink that than maybe a $20 wine from a different region, arguably even a $20 Côte d'Aron. I'd actually rather drink a $20 Bordeaux. So I agree with you. But then when the quality gets better and better, then the prices get astronomical, and then there's a huge divide there.
So here's
Oh,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
No.
Here's why I would slightly disagree with you
Ooh, I like
on
this.
this. Well, maybe it's more than I disagree.
Oh, I like this.
Because here's my issue, and again, this is why Bordeaux doesn't show up higher on my list. It is very true that you can buy Bordeaux at reasonable price points. A lot of Bordeaux is sold at lower price points, and it's important for the consumer to know that, because I think people think Bordeaux is expensive. It's not, actually. You can go right now to Specs or Total Wine and buy Bordeaux for $20, $25. My issue is, in my experience, those wines are not as good as, let's say, a Bordeaux blend from Chile for $20, because they're, or $25, because there what you're getting are some of their better Bordeaux blends in a lot of cases. And I've side by side compared some of these, and I can't say it's scientific. This is simply my experience. If I'm going to spend $20 to $25 on a what we would call a Bordeaux blend, you know what I mean by that. I'm going somewhere else other than Bordeaux, because I see more opportunities for quality there. Whereas I don't want a Bordeaux that is just like the least that Bordeaux can make. And I do love their great wines, but at the lower end, I just haven't had a great experience with that. And I don't know what you think about some of these wines, like Mouton Cadet, for example. It is probably less than $20, but I think it's crap. And
It is, but that's less than 20. I'm talking about
Right.
just regional Bordeaux that's not massively produced.
Yeah.
And also, I'll disagree with you right back. I like this. I love debating. It's bad. But I think that, you can go to other Bordeaux. You can go to South Africa, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to Chile. You can go to
Argentina,
other value regions. But the quality varies drastically within producers. Like, at least with Bordeaux, I kind of know what I'm getting straight across the board. With those other guys, it's Russian roulette, dude. And I'm struggling, because I could find something that's total crap, or I can find something that's very lovely and punches above its weight.
Yeah, and I think maybe, where we would meet up on this in a way is that
we're finding
if
a
you don't-
compromise.
If you don't
he's
feel
so
if you don't
passive,
feel
yeah.
super inspired by Bordeaux at $100 a bottle, you're probably not going to be super inspired at $20. So it's about what you're looking for too. This is why I don't buy $20 to $25 Bordeaux, because there are other wine regions where I can get an experience that's the kind of experience I want at the same price point.
I would agree.
And one of the reasons I like Bordeaux, and I'm just going to bring up, because I think, one, this is going to sound silly to you two, but for people listening that might go, you keep talking about a Bordeaux blend, it's the Cab, the Merlot, the Cab Franc, the Malbec, and the Petit Verdot. Those are the grapes that are thought of in Bordeaux. And so when you talk about Napa, let's say, they use a lot of those same grapes, but they're labeled differently, obviously, based on percentages. I think a lot of people who are, we're predominantly listened to in the United States, they're in the Napa, and they're intimidated or don't want to go to Bordeaux. And I think, coming from Napa, wanting to explore other regions, I think that's one that you can get into first to try to experience what those varietals can be from a different style and winemaking process and things like that. That's why it's one for me. It was one that helped me transition into exploring wines globally more than just staying in the Napa Valley.
And we support your choice.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So that was my reason.
Right.
Part of my reason for picking it. But, I guess I'm coming back
Yeah.
with number 2. This is a wine region. Just kidding, Daniela. Rhone Valley. That's you kind of knocked, gave all the highlights of it, why. I can't do much better than what you said, Chris, but the Rhone Valley is a favorite of mine. I love Northern Rhone. I love the Grenache heavy Southern Rhone. I love Chateauneuf. It's just, to me, you get good value. The Côte Rôties I like,
And if Daniela forced you to pick north or south?
North, because I think I get more variety there, as far as value and styles and,
You're still not okay with this, Danielle.
No, I'm fine with it. I'm trying to stay quiet because, I feel like I was a bit aggressive.
No, you're fine.
So I think to me, they're two separate regions, and I know that we study them together, and that's completely fine. But I think they're so different in style, and I think that they should be separated. And that is the end of my soapbox rant.
But to get to the point of Rob's choice, I think it does really demonstrate. If you go to a wine store and you start looking at wines, you look at the Rhone Valley, there are a lot of choices.
A lot.
There are whites, there are reds, there are different grape varieties, there are different blends when you get into the south. There are rosés.
Yeah.
You have Côte de Rhone, right?
Yeah.
There's a regional blends. So this is why I think from any perspective, and whether you're talking about a wine expert or the so-called ordinary consumer, the Rhone Valley is going to make the list, some way or another.
Yeah.
And that was a big criteria for me. It was how much can I, move around and have variety within that region versus just on one wine.
Yeah.
That was for me.
Versus committing.
Subjective, yeah.
That's fine.
Because if I had picked Piedmont, I would have went Piedmont because I
Sure.
like Barbaresco too.
Shoot.
But there's nothing wrong with you going, I like Barolo so much, I'm sticking right there.
Well, I would have picked Piemonte if it had been if I thought it was a choice. But I think that being very specific was helpful for me because then I could have waxed poetic about a million different regions that had larger regions that had
that
so
means
many
we're
different
going to
styles.
do another show.
Sure.
There we go.
All right, number 2 for you, Daniel.
Yeah, mine's the same. Mine actually, and to commit, is also the Northern Rhone.
Nice.
I'm obsessed with Syrah. I think, especially Northern Rhone Syrah, I've had those emotional moments smelling violet, smelling, all these dried herbs, smelling meat. And I think that people don't drink enough Syrah, and it makes me angry because it's such a cool wine. And if you don't like it in the north, drink it from the south or drink it from Australia.
Yep.
Australian Shiraz is wonderful if it's from the right producer. I love, especially old Australian Shiraz, give it to me all day long. But Northern Rhone just has this finesse and this beauty. And if you think about it, it's a continuation of Burgundy. And it has that lighter, sort of floral nuance that I think Burgundy provides. And I just love these wines. They're gorgeous, and I support Northern Rhone all the way. And nobody's drinking. I guarantee most of your listeners or most of the world are not drinking Northern Rhone. So that's the moral of the story is we all picked it, and you all have to go and try it.
Yeah, and because Syrah is growing at its limit in the Northern Rhone for the most part, right? Where it's the coldest region where you can, and when you see wine regions where grapes are grown at the limit where it's about as cold as it can be for the grapes to fully ripen, in my view, this is where you see some of the world's most beautiful wines.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I love Syrah too, but Syrah in much hotter climates, to me is different. It starts to bake out some of that, the pepper that you get, black pepper. And so, yeah, absolutely. Well, it was already on my list, but yeah. The Syrah.
So we all support this choice.
We're all in,
Good.
I think that's the only one that we've all so far.
Actually, I was surprised that we have a common. When you said Rhone and you said Rhone, I was like, okay, good, we're in similar. Yeah.
So
number
my
2.
number 2 is.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah,
2, and
we just did 2.
My number 2 is Burgundy. We haven't talked about Burgundy yet, so I'm guessing it's going to be mentioned by Daniela. I'm going to guess it's her number 1, but so the fact is that these are wines, and it's interesting because when I looked at my criteria, so they don't have a lot of diversity in terms of grape varieties. We're really talking about 2. There are more, but we're really talking about Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And in terms of styles, there are stylistic differences, but again, they're within a fairly tight range overall. But to me, what I personally love about Burgundy is that, first of all, the wines, again, they're grown at a very northern limit, along with Champagne for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So they're ripe grapes, but they're not overripe. I hate overripe Pinot Noir, and same with Chardonnay. And so they're just beautiful. They're gorgeous wines. And also, the other thing about Burgundy is this intellectual exercise, because there are all these vineyards and so many differences between the villages and the vineyards, and you could spend a lifetime and not really understand Burgundy. You know, I have these books on Burgundy that are super thick, and they barely even cover it in some ways. So you can explore this to an infinite degree, and they're beautiful. And you will. And the other thing is, going back to what Daniela said about the beauty of the region, Burgundy. So for me, Burgundy is the most beautiful wine region I've ever been to.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, I think it is just because it's so pastoral, and it's slow. The villages are very small. You know, they're the typical very small French village. You know, with one place you get your bread. You know, it opens a certain time, it closes a certain time, and you go through these villages. You go to dinner in Burgundy. Nobody's looking at their cell phones. You know, everybody's
it's a
just
lifestyle
time zone.
that you-
Absolutely,
yeah.
It's a lifestyle, and so this is what a lot of people, and I think you might agree with me. We talked about Bordeaux not feeling it emotionally, not feeling the soul. You get tons of soul and emotion. At least I do in drinking great Burgundy. So, and finally, the last thing I would say is, going back to what you just talked about Bordeaux, I believe you can spend $20, $25, $30 on a regional Bourgogne Rouge, a red Burgundy, and come home and feel very happy about it.
So you like that for a $25 value, way better than Bordeaux?
Way better.
Okay.
And it's getting better. It's gotten better over the years. Yeah. And
So I think that's a perception of a lot of people who might drink Pinot Noir, thinking if you go to Burgundy, now we're getting into expensive. And
it can be. It can be very expensive.
It doesn't have to
and frankly, honestly, it's too expensive. A lot of it's too expensive for my taste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But which is why I don't buy a lot of Burgundy. But at a lower level, you can get great wines. And let's not forget, Burgundy includes Chablis. I love Chablis.
Yeah.
And so you get that too. There you go. That's my number 2.
Love it.
We'll let you give your number 1 before we talk too much.
Yeah, it's just going to be a continuation of
That's
this
why
discussion.
I said we'll let you talk first.
Yeah. I think, obviously, Burgundy is my number 1, and I'll be very concise about this because I think Chris said a lot of main points.
Talk too long.
Yeah, he talked way too long. No, I think there are very few moments in my life where I wanted to cry when I was drinking a wine, or I wanted to pray, or when I felt like a holy presence. And I know this sounds dramatic, but white Burgundy for me, it does something to me that is, there's no other way to describe it other than it was this transcendental experience where I felt like things were complete at that moment. And a lot of those times I was drinking the bottles with my mom, who understood it. Like, we were looking into each other's eyes and like, do you get it? Like, yeah. I get it. And it was all Grand Cru Burgundy, of course, so we spent a little bit more. But it's worth it. And I don't think that this is a very unpopular opinion, but I think that I find the whites more contemplative than the reds. I just think that all the best experiences were with this one grape that expresses itself differently according to these different terroir patches. And nothing to me is more poetic than that. I love it.
Yeah.
And I sell it. Thank God.
Yeah.
I could have sold anything else and been really unhappy. And I believe in it because I'm tasting all these examples, and they're so freaking good.
So because you sell it, how often do you get to go and visit producers? And
Yeah. So,
experience it?
well, I got hired during COVID. So I just went for the first time to the particular chateau. I've been to Burgundy before, but I went in April, and then I'm actually leading a trip in May.
Oh, really?
So yeah,
Cool.
I'm bringing over some clients and
To Burgundy.
We're just gonna drink and hang out and
That doesn't sound terrible.
Make memories.
go
Yeah.
to like yeah. So
Tough job.
it's really difficult. It's hard.
But I just to comment on what you said about having a transcendent experience with wine. I think that is the ultimate wine experience, is where you lose a sense of self, you lose a sense of time, and there's no separation between you and the universe, and that can happen with wine. And now you're probably going to have to pay for it, or somebody's going to have to pay for it.
Or you're gonna have to pay for a plane ticket to get it too.
It's definitely situational, for sure, drinking wine.
Yeah.
But this is one of the things that I think is available in wine, is true transcendence in terms of your experience. And again, I probably wouldn't be into wine if you couldn't have those kinds of experiences.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Chardonnay is the best grape to me. And I know that it should be Riesling or whatever to the sommelier world. To me, it's Chardonnay. No matter where it's from, like I find Chardonnays in various regions where I'm like, I'm just so in love with this. It just has everything that I want. And it's so much more than citrus fruit and tropical fruit. There's white flower, there's hazelnut, there's so many other things. And you can add other things to it. And I just think it's so misunderstood. It's not just oaky and buttery. And, that's the point of educating people, letting them know that there's something else.
Yeah, and that's kind of, when you talk about wine, that's a big point for me when I talk to people, is that just because when you like a grape, a particular varietal, don't form an opinion that that's what it should be everywhere. To your point, it's
Totally.
going to be different everywhere, and go into wine with an open mind. You have to have an open mind, willing to explore, and kind of understand why the winemaker, why the wine is this way in the bottle versus maybe where I get it over here. Why is it different? And then you start getting into other things when you talk about soil and terroir and things like that.
Yeah.
That's what makes wine fun for me.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right, my number one. You ready?
Ooh,
Then we'll get
I'm
to
actually
honor.
really interested in
said
that.
you're number one, then I'll tell you my number one.
Yeah,
I know
you're
you're assuming
closing
what
it.
my number one is, but I haven't given my number one yet.
Oh,
but go ahead.
No. Where are we at?
No, it's you and then me. We
Yeah,
snaked
you're
around.
finishing
Yeah.
it out, Chris.
Okay, my number one is a region that I've probably been into the longest, other than where I started in wine. But I absolutely fell in love with the grape, and I love just what I get out of that region, and it's Tuscany.
Okay.
I love the Sangiovese grape, and I have some friends that think it's the worst grape in the world. And I'm like, you're crazy.
Well, they're wrong.
They are wrong.
Getting into this wine, or getting into this region, years ago I had a friend coming over for dinner. I was making an Italian dish, and he said, I'm going to bring a Chianti Classico Reserva. And I was like, oh, what? To myself, going, why would he bring that? And it was at the time where, everything on the shelf was, $10 with this little
The
weave
basket.
Yeah.
The stupid basket bottle.
And Chianti had kind of gotten a bad rap, and I don't know that it had truly come out of that yet. Now, to me, it has. I think it's kind of made some comeback where people appreciate Chianti again. But I remember having that wine that night with him and going, okay, I was wrong. This is actually really good. And it kind of triggered me to go, okay, I'm going to go explore this region a little bit. And getting into Chiantis, which I do like. I mean, maybe I'm looked down. People go, you shouldn't drink that wine. I love Chianti. I don't drink Chiantis. I like Chianti Classicos and Reservas. But then getting into Brunellos, and I mean, there's just all kinds of wines out of that region. And then you mentioned it earlier, Chris, when you get into Super Tuscans and things that are going to be, or that are being made from Bordeaux grapes, I think are beautiful. And I like learning about not just the Sangiovese are not just the Bordeaux grapes, but the indigenous grapes that they use to blend and add, some roundness or to the wines that they make, and learning about those particular grapes. I can't pronounce them because I don't do good with pronunciation, but I just find it very interesting, fascinating, and just a wonderful experience when I drink wines from that region. Just love it.
Yeah. And they're great food wines. That's the thing.
Great food wines.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful region. I think we
absolutely.
haven't harped on wine tourism enough, because when you're there, it's the most manicured, beautiful, rolling hills, cypress trees, the whole shebang. When you think of a classic wine region, I think most people go to Tuscany, and that's their experience.
And for me, Tuscany led me to, like Umbria, where I don't think a lot of people talk about wines. And I found some great wines in there. So I think getting into some of these regions leads you to some other regions that a lot of people don't think about as a wine kind of region, that you should be drinking wines from those regions. And for me, it did. It opened up a lot of different regions for me.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I'm not going to shock anybody here with my number one.
You want to guess, Daniela?
Napa.
Right.
That's my guess.
Right. So it's champagne, of course. And, I everybody knows I love champagne. We did an entire podcast on champagne and around the book I wrote about champagne. So I don't need to say a lot more about it. But here's what I will say. When I looked at my list, it was tough to order them. I like the top 5, and then what's 2 versus 1 or 3 versus 2. But when I got to champagne, my issue was, okay, let me just ask myself, if one of these wine regions went away, how would I feel about it? Which one would break my heart the most? And it's Champagne. Because with all these other wine regions, and look, Burgundy was number 2. We just talked about how great it is. If Burgundy went away tomorrow, that would be horrible. Can I get great Pinot Noir, again, still Pinot Noir and great Chardonnay elsewhere in the world? Yes. As good as Burgundy? Maybe not. But we can sit here for a long time and talk about Burgundy and Chardonnay in different parts of the world. Yeah. Same with Bordeaux blends. But Champagne, if Champagne went away tomorrow, it would break my heart, because there is sparkling wine made all over the world. It's with the Champagne method in many cases, or the traditional method. There is a lot of it's made with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. It's not as good as Champagne in general. The styles aren't there, the different ranges. And so to me, Champagne is irreplaceable. And and also we talked about this, but it's great with food. People just don't understand it as well, and that's fine. But to me, the number one wine region, I don't think it's close, to me, is Champagne.
He threw in, I don't think it's close.
I don't. It's not for me, because...
Drop the mic.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of sparkling wines, completely agree. And let me tell you why, and this is going to sound really snobby, and I might have a lot of regions come after me for this, but I've blind tasted flights of sparkling wines many times, either for my own exams, for somebody else's, to help people practice. And you can always point out the champagne.
Yeah, and that's
the
true.
Champagne's always the best one.
Yeah, and that is true. And when you, like we did in the diploma, we had to take a sparkling wine course, and we had to blind sparkling wines. And it is true. They stand out, especially the good ones. And again, are there lower quality champagne? Sure. And there's a range of quality in champagne. But the high quality champagnes stand alone. And
even the non-vintage house styles are sometimes better than the best ones from other regions. Sorry.
Charles Heidsieck Reserve, we talked about this before. It's $45 to $50 with inflation. It used to be $40 champagne. It's absolutely amazing, for example. Louis Roederer, it's non-vintage, so...
That's a great point. Champagne doesn't have to be a vintage. A lot of people, they see wines in general when we talk about wines, and they see, for the most part, a vintage on that wine. And then they go to Champagne and don't see it and might assume that, well, if it doesn't have a vintage, it's not quality, which couldn't be further from the truth.
Right. And we talked about, I think we talked about that on the Champagne podcast too.
You haven't
so
listened
I don't
to
want
that.
to repeat everything
Well,
we
but
said.
some people might be listening to this, didn't listen to that. So go back and definitely listen to the Champagne episode if you haven't heard it, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that once you've actually lined them up for yourself, like Chris and I now both teach these courses, and when we get to things that are outside of Champagne, I do say like, hey, if you wanna not pay as much and enjoy Champagne method wines, here are all these options. And people get so excited because they can save all this money. And I used to think that, oh, good, I can spend $30 versus $50 and be perfectly happy and think it's the same. But it actually wasn't until I started doing that sparkling wine program and lining them all up where I went, oh, there is a reason why Champagne is touted as the best sparkling wine in the world, because it is. Because it just simply is.
Yeah.
It
is. Well, that's the subtitle to my book. Talk about the world's greatest sparkling wine.
Yeah.
But and I think, and again, not to go on, but I think it's more than that. I mean, if it were just the world's greatest sparkling wine, that'd be one thing. I think it's the greatest wine region because if you really get into it, you can see how well it pairs with food and how versatile it is in many ways.
I support this decision. Champagne didn't even make my top 5.
I know it didn't make your top 5.
But because I don't drink. I just
don't.
You
need to drink more.
I know I need to drink more of it. I drink a lot of champagne. It's just not.
Well, you know
I
what?
don't get that. It's just.
Daniela's coming over to my house for dinner tonight, and we'll drink
She'll get
some
some
Yeah,
champagne.
she is. She's getting. Yeah. Okay.
We'll do a follow-up.
Yeah.
Okay, so nobody's going to argue with you at number 1. I mean, I have it on my list. Daniela doesn't, but she acknowledges great
I know
region.
that it should be, but I just go weird because that's just who I am.
I like-
I'm a very
I like your
strange
list.
person. Yeah.
I like your list too. It's all subjective, and there is no one right answer to this.
I mean, your list, obviously for the 2 that I didn't expect, made me go, okay, now I want to go kind of search that out, find a couple, and see what I think. So
that was the point.
yeah, absolutely. Let's get into honorable mentions. Let's get 2 or 3 regions that didn't make your top 5, but maybe in the past would have, or were at least in consideration for the top 5. Do you want to lead the way, Daniela?
Well, so I didn't know we were supposed to do this, so mine's gonna be like very quick.
Do you want to go last to give you a little bit of time to think?
I'll do gut feeling and move on from that. Does that sound okay?
Yeah. Your whole list was on emotion and feeling anyway.
I know,
so why not?
it's all
Let's
emotional
go.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I might go South Africa for honorable mention. I think that all of us stayed away from the New World, and I'm actually really sad about that. I was really disappointed in myself that I didn't put a single New World region, and I think it's really unfair. The reason why I didn't... Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The reason why I didn't is because there's a lot of variation in quality, and a lot of it's producer-driven, and I don't feel confident, picking out anything from the shelf and thinking that it's going to be delicious. So there's a lot of research that goes into it, trying to find, but I think that if you are going to pick a New World region, South Africa combines the New World fruit and the Old World rusticity, and I love Chenin Blanc. I think it's great, I don't know. I think that the Cab blends, to your point, your Bordeaux blends. If I'm going to drink anything outside of Bordeaux, it's going to be from Stellenbosch. So
yeah, I like how you were going very small on your subregions, and now you're taking a whole country.
Well, yeah, no, okay, but
okay.
first of all,
call her out, Chris.
South Africa is very okay. Yeah, but
I'm just kidding. I just had to say it because you gave me such a hard time.
I know
about
I
the
give
Rhone
you
Valley.
so much crap. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Let me just. So
You want to throw one out?
I do.
Okay.
I could easily put this in my top 5 and very high up, and that's Madeira.
Oh, I like this a lot.
I love Madeira so much. Very few people really understand it. But the thing about Madeira, you talk about long-lived wines. It's,
Yeah.
I think, the longest-lived wine, right?
Agreed,
Because
yeah.
the process, it's essentially cooked to some extent in the beginning of the process. So you can open up a bottle of Madeira that is 100 years old, and it'll be fresh. And it has
Yeah.
high acidity. It's, again, another great food wine. Very few people buy it, which I like because, again, you can buy these old wines. If you want to buy, let's say, 82 vintage of Bordeaux, from one of the top producers, you're going to spend a ton of money. And you can buy really old Madeira. And yes, it's going to be expensive. It gets more expensive the older you get, but it's not crazy. And you can experience what wine was like, over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But the quality is there, the high acidity, the length, the complexity of the flavors. And I just think not enough people have really had a chance to explore it. But if you start looking at fortified wines, it's really hard not to fall in love with Madeira.
I think this is great. I think I completely agree. Love it. I don't think I have anything to add other than love.
A region for me that made my honorable mention, it is New World,
Great.
Mendoza.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of Malbec.
Okay.
And I think that region, there's a couple producers that we like there, Katina being one of our favorites with Dr. Laura. I think they make great wines. You can get great value out of that region for now. Hopefully it stays that way. But it's just a region that my wife and I really enjoy. And then just, from that region, exploring some more other regions within that country of Argentina. Right on the Andes Mountains, some of the elevations they get, I just think for what you're paying, for the quality, it's just one that I think people should be exploring.
I think high elevation Malbec is great. And, if you love those wines, like high elevation, go to Salta.
Okay.
Salta, Argentina, is the highest altitude vineyard in the world, actually. It's called Altura Maxima, so maximum elevation. And it's by Colomé, and it's great.
Oh, really?
The wines are
Okay.
really cool. Malbec on the valley floor gets really juicy and jammy and over-extracted to me. But on the mountainside, it gets this grassiness and this herbal quality that's really, and the earthiness. It's really, really neat.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a great choice.
You guys have another one?
Maybe we can go on and on, but
I'm just going to throw one more out, Mosel.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
obviously,
Germany.
that easily could have been on the top 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also love wines from the Jura. That's another kind of obscure one, but I love the oxidative styles of wines there. So
I'm going to throw out some countries and you guys can just quick reaction of where I would like to learn a little bit more about the wines from those countries. And they're just kind of Austria, Australia, South Africa, still Spain. I think, everybody thinks Rioja, but I've heard, I haven't ventured into, but there's some great little regions in Spain that you can get into and find some fabulous wines.
Yeah.
New Zealand, Argentina, and Chile, are kind of
Yeah.
where I would like to start kind of exploring.
I just booked a trip to Chile because I wanted to know more about Chilean wines. It was really more of a wine curiosity, and I think that I tend to pigeonhole New World, and I think we don't get a lot of these amazing wines shipped to us. So I think that I understand a region much more after being there, as is everybody. So that was my, get out of your French box, Daniela, and go and see some other parts of the world that you haven't seen.
yeah.
Anything else? Is there a region that people are going to be shocked isn't on our list that we
Well, I
want?
Probably
think the elephant
California.
in the
That's
room,
what I
yeah.
was- yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't mention Napa Valley, and I think that would be on a lot of people's top 5s. It's interesting that for all 3 of us, it wasn't on our top 5.
A high elevation Cabernet or Chardonnay is incredible, or Pinot.
Yeah.
I mean, the Santa Rita Mountains or Santa Cruz, there's so many different high elevation, in the mountainside that really does taste like Burgundy and I hate I hate when people say Burgundian style, but for lack of a better word, like those are things that I like to drink, and so those wines resonate with me. So there are producers. The problem is it's so producer driven, and that's the thing is like with Europe, you have all these laws that dictate what a wine should sort of taste like, so you get some consistency in style. But when you go New World, you don't know what you're going to get. And I think that's the problem, is that I don't want something jammy, alcoholic, and over-extracted. I want something with acidity, with vibrancy, with zest, and nuances of flavor. And so that's the problem here.
I think that's great, and I'm just going to add value.
Yes.
I mean, Napa can be very expensive compared to what you can get as far as quality in other parts of the world.
I agree, but it also depends on what you like to drink. Like, you could really love Napa Cab and its extracted flavors. Like, we're biologically predispositioned to love sugar and love high amounts of alcohol because that's what kept us alive. So that's what people gravitate towards, and they'd probably would rather spend that on $100 on a Napa Cab than $100 on a Burgundian Pinot Noir. That is all down to biology, and that is okay. I think we don't make it okay in our weird wine world, Yeah. And it should be.
Yeah, and if it's somebody else has Napa on their top 5, that's great. It's just not
Nothing
on
wrong
mine
with it,
because
yeah.
And there are a lot of producers I love in Napa, and to mention a couple, Coruscant and Dunn.
Yes.
But my issue with Napa are all the things you described. Plus, I just don't love some of the Napa culture, frankly. And there are 3 books written by a guy named James Conaway that were really good. They're written over a period. I think the first one was written in 1990. The last one was in 2008, so almost 30 years, about 3 different books about Napa. And it really covers the arc of, wow, Napa is really cool. There's these farmers, they're making great wine, to there's a lot more money coming into it, to it's all screwed up. And so I love those books. I think they actually do a great job of explaining what some of the issues are with Napa. And so as much as I like some of the wines, it doesn't really come close to making my top 5.
Yeah. Here's a region in California that intrigues me that I want to get into, and it's focused on Pinot. Santa Barbara. Do you guys have some thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree. Again, like a very cool area that's great with sparkling wines and still wine. I mean, I think the cooler regions, right. I mean, it's small and it's hard to find. I would really love, that's my next California bucket list item. Yeah, Santa Barbara, Santa Rita Hills. Yeah, I'd love to go.
I love Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from the Santa Rita Hills.
Do you really?
Absolutely.
So it's a region that I've been intrigued by and want to explore a little bit more. I've had a couple bottles and I went, that's really good. Yeah. I need to kind of dive a little deeper into this. So
I think my final thing would be Lebanon.
Really?
Yeah. Lebanese wine, like I'll just throw my final weird ass curveball into the mix, which is Lebanese wines are so good.
Yeah.
I mean, I have one specific producer in mind, which is probably my favorite producer, and Lebanon would have made the list if this was the only producer in Lebanon, and that's Chateau Moussard.
Yeah.
But those wines give me feelings everywhere, and good feelings, like the heebie-jeebies.
It's a grape indigenous to Lebanon.
Well, some of them are.
They're blends.
They're blends, and there are a lot of like Cabernet and Syrah that's
in there.
Okay.
Chateau Moussard is a very wine geeky loving. I love Chateau Moussard. It's not very expensive comparatively because there's a lot of Brett, on that wine. But my wife and I both love Chateau Moussard because we don't mind that.
No,
it's not. Again, on the internet is where I usually find my wines, but
even and you at can Twins
and you can find older vintages too. We drink. We love drinking older vintages of Chateau Moussard, and it doesn't cost me that much money comparatively. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you guys for doing this today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to have to do a follow-up in 6 months or a year and see where our lists are then compared to what we listed today.
I think they will have changed.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of Food, Wine, and Whiskey. And until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.